Three presentations. Yes, one thing's not that I make a plan.
Oh, okay. Sorry, it's really funny to enter a room about ghosts and everybody's rushing. There's something going on there. I need to see it.
That's why.
Okay, so we got three presentations. We'll do it in the usual way, 20 minutes, then 10 minutes for discussion, three times. So our first speaker is Pablo Lazo from Universidad Iberoamericana. We'll speak to Derrida's reading of Nietzschean Future Community of Friends. Please.
Thank you very much to be here, my ghostly and possible friends, and you will know why I'm saying this. Number one, the problem of Nietzsche's symbolic language, solitude, and community. Here I intend to give an ethical, social, and political interpretation of the use of symbols by Nietzsche, so I can approach to Derrida's discussion of friendship and the future community of friends, considered in its spectral fashion. What Nietzsche brings into play with the use of symbolic language is the immanence of the world as a direct experience or contingent plane, which does not depend on the supposed transcendent reality that orders everything. The use of symbols thus leads to perspectivism as the only valid epistemological approach to things. The multiplications of interpretations is paradoxically the only valid interpretation. Derrida establishes the link between this Nietzschean perspectivism with difference and writing against logocentrism or phonocentrism. Here we will see how this question adopts also the modality of a critique of fratocentrism. Nietzsche's message is addressed in the first place to a minority of men and women who are not yet wholly co-opted or absorbed by a decadent culture. The men and women who can construct a future full of joy and pride for themselves. This is one of the central problems of the politics of friendship, the question of how many friends can make up the community. And this remains a pressing issue because Derrida seeks to find in Nietzsche a foundation for critiquing our current forms of egalitarian democracy and politics, which have inherited the restrictive and positive notion of fraternity as the sole form of friendship or community. And this sounds strange because we just passed 4th of July. So if democratic forms of politics continue to summon the greatest number, which alludes to Nietzschean notions of the mob, the domestication of the masses, and the standardization of life, Zarathustra summons the few, the solitary, those who resist the imposed way of life. Or, in Derrida's words, those who follow the path from Nietzsche to Bataille, Blanchot, and Nancy, those who would constitute it the community of those without community. Some may argue Nietzsche's idea of a new culture made up of empowered and emancipated men, free thinkers or free spirits who are self-governed, creator of their own values, friend of their friends only, is just an illusory utopia, not achievable in the material realm of social things. Such a stand lies above all in the criticism of the idea of Superman as empty of actual social content and unattainable in terms of community. Superman could be a good orientation for experiences of individual improvement, but it never could be extended to the configuration of communities made up of various individuals with different experiences of interiority. This would mean that Nietzsche's utopian idea of a free and non-nihilistic culture cannot be considered as a social basis of friendship, understood ethically and politically as the basis of all communities. Contrary to this criticism, I argue that the recovery of Nietzsche's symbolic language does allow one to think of a community in an ethical and political sense that is relevant to building a future culture and, in fact, opens the question of future itself. How does Zarathustra speak to his future friends? Always through symbols. Why? First, because he speaks to his contemporaries only to distance himself from them or to enact the pathos of distance. To put it in the symbolic metaphor of those who spoke Zarathustra, he speaks to his children or brothers yet to come. The call for a self-rearing free from nihilistic and cultural decadence, a self-education without domestication, is summed up in the pathos of distance from what has been inherited. In second place, and most significantly, he speaks through symbols because he is deconstructing the formal discourse of traditional rationalistic philosophy and its moral and metaphysical consequences. In this way, he is seeking to enact that kind of language that is inseparable of actions. Number two, Derrida's reading of Nietzschean future community of friends. Where does Derrida's reflection on community in the Nietzschean sense begin? We find it in paragraph 376 of Human All Too Human, titled On Friends. In this passage, Nietzsche challenges the assumptions underlying the phrase attributed to Aristotle, friends, there are no friends. According to a Heist interpretation of this statement, different opinions, feelings, and disagreements among those who call themselves friends lead to hostility when they become aware of them. Differences in talent, character, occupation, and background always leads to a sense of irremediable loneliness that prevents friendship. But what really led us to think this way, says Nietzsche, is our own ever-changing set of opinions, our dispositions, and our moods, which others endure and about which they have to know how to remain silent in order to make friendship possible. Therefore, before we look down on others, Nietzsche tells us, we must turn this feeling against ourselves and learn to put up with ourselves so that we may put up with others. And only then, instead of saying, friends, there are no friends, like the dying sage or wise man, will we be able to exclaim, enemies, there are no enemies, like the living fool or madman. Nietzsche's reference to the dying sage may refer to the theories he seeks to reject, whose assumptions prevent him from accepting friendship in a vital sense, that is, the metaphysician and the moralist. For this reason, he must be surpassed by the living fool, who reverses the phrase in a vital sense. This vital sense includes the transfiguration of the friend into an enemy, their constant inversion, as Derrida also says. Well, disregarding this call for a vital friendship, what continues to bind us today is fraternization in its pursuit of democracy, the masculine model of brotherhood, of patriarchy, the androcentric version of the political. And when discussing the power of the symbolic in this reiteration that binds us, Derrida highlights its exclusionary nature, which constantly besieges us in the name of brotherhood and kinship. Most of the time that Derrida refers to the power of the symbolic or of the symbol in the politics of friendship, he insists that it concerns to the symbolic inherited from the tradition of the fraternal, of belonging, of the family, or the nation. That is, solely to reinforce the sense of the community of friendship in its classical meaning, with all its ethical and political oppression and exclusion. To take an example, when discussing the dreamt construction of friendship and brotherhood in political discourses that refers to birth and belonging, we always encounter a symbolic fiction or a symbolic effect, a symbolic projection, which is exaggerated as an indisputable reality that has been renaturalized for the purpose of legitimizing such a discourse. Alternatively, when fraternization is described as a symbolic bond that alleging the repetition of a genetic bond, in order to defend the natural and necessary observance of the law of equality among men, which takes on rather mystical characteristics. However, As we explore the power of Nietzsche's symbols, our questions lies in inquiring whether there is another aspect of the symbolic that connects or binds us, but not in the sense of fraternal democracy and its underlying violence. We wonder about a use of symbols that does indeed bring us together and binds us, but in the sense of respect and responsibility towards the other. In Greek, symbolon means to be thrown toward, to be with the other. We are symbols of the other, his complements. And here there is an obvious reference to Plato's theory of the androgyne in the Symposium. With Derrida, we ask again, is being a symbol to be thrown toward another as my exemplary repetition, I as his model and he as my copy? And to that extent, is he my exemplary friend? This sense of Cicero's discourse, which is later continued in Montaigne, is what Derrida seeks to deconstruct, for it responds to the logic of identity of the same thing that is reiterated. It is at this moment that we can emphasize the dual function of the symbol that prevents it from closing in on itself in a reiteration. On the one hand, the symbol speaks, reveals meaning, illuminates, shows that to which it points significantly. On the other hand, the symbol is silent, conceals meaning, sinks into the mysterious realm of the enigma, merely hints at or alludes to that which sustains it. This dual function of the symbol opens up to the experience of chance and randomness, to the absence of purpose, to the absence of rationality as calculation, and thus detaches itself from the metaphysics of linear determination, assured teleology, and the premeditated calculation of the communal relationships. If one were to speak of an image that captures this use of symbols, it would have to be that of Zarathustra's wild wisdom, opposed to will to truth, as a drive toward determination and domination over knowledge. To be a symbol of another is not equivalent to one's reflection of the self in the realm of determination, both ontological and political, and to the discourse on truth as a will to domination, but rather to the silence that occurs between two when they are referred to the enigma of the symbol. This symbolic dimension is the one that both reveals and conceals, the one that establishes without foundation, words of Derrida, establishes without foundation the ever-possible bonds of the community without community. This symbolic dimension refers to a politics of friendship that paradoxically and through the mechanism of undecidability calls for a new form of symbolic discourse that refers to unity in and through discontinuity. Only in this way can be founded a politics of separation. This politics of separation occurs within the among of language, says Derrida, not outside of it. It is in the use of symbols that the praxis is made possible which breaks into language and reverses its normalized functions to introduce elements of the unnamed, which Nietzsche adopts, Derrida says, the mystical tone of asceticism or kenosis, emptying of meaning, to activate, through aphorisms and paradoxical statements, the action of rebellion or resistance to such a state of domestication. In the fracture of interstice of the prevailing meaning, in the among of the language itself, the rupture of the symbolic operates as a striking out of the logophonocentric meaning and the emergence of writing and difference as a silence among friends. Since the call to the members of the community without community is made through symbols rather than through the assured discourse of metaphysics, ethics, or politics of the common, it appeals to those who are not present in the here and now, those who take the form of specters that lurk and besiege, whether in the future, the new philosophers whom Nietzsche seeks and who are in some way already arriving, but also to those who have disappeared into the past, to those who demand justice as victims of the self-centered power of political historical domination that has murdered, excluded, and subjugated in the name of the common and the benefit of the greatest number. The heterological politics taught by Derrida is also a spectrology that speaks through the use of symbols, appealing to the unshown, those who remained in the periphery of the hegemonic use of language, and who can only appear as specters foretold and feared by this hegemony, which is itself political. In this sense, symbolic spectrology implies an enormous sense of responsibility, unprecedented in the history of the common and the familiar in our politics. Oikoites, appropriation, nation, or state. For it entails the obligation to respond to the call of the singularity of the other, yet to come, or left behind, yet one that always distances itself from the Greek sense of philia. This is where we can find the resonance of the perhaps, to which Derrida constantly alludes as a new orientation for Nietzsche's community of friends. For its new truth is always paradoxical and unstable. The perhaps corresponds to the madness of the one who subverts and inverts the friends, there are no friends, into foes, there are no foes, enemies, there are no enemies. For all the reasons for good friendship provided by the metaphysical, ethical, and political tradition are overturned. And it is the mad truth of symbols that allude to or suggest, without seeking to dominate, possess, or calculate the meaning shared as truth, from the paradoxical solitude of this strange spectral community. Therefore, we argue that this experience of the perhaps, which cannot be conceived as an abstract theorization of community, but rather must take place in the practical realm of political friendship, implies the use of symbols as a condition for a vital praxis of the singularities involved, with all their concrete, historical, and finite connotations, which open the way to the construction of a community yet to come. Such a future community, and the particular experience of friendship that makes it possible, do not correspond to the traditional understanding that Nietzsche is rejecting. Derrida has emphasized the specific model of political community and friendship that animates Nietzsche's wager. According to him, we can distinguish two entirely different strands of philosophical interpretation of friendship. On the one hand, the legacy common to thinkers who claimed it is a relationship governed by, and I quote Derrida, by the value of reciprocity, by homological, immanentist, finitist, and rather politist concord, end of the quote. This idea pertains to a logic of sameness and proximity, in which to be a friend is to share an entire world in common and to resemble each other. On the other hand, we find the legacy of counter-traditional thinkers who break with this idea while defending non-reciprocity, heterology, dissymmetry, infinity, and transcendence as components of friendship. The friends and the community formed by them in this second model do not attempt to values like commonality and similarity and the law of the same, but they instead seek rivalry, polemos, the distance among them, and difference. Nietzsche is a central case of thinker that defends such a sense of friendship based on the symbolic language and this strength. And this is because he helps to trigger the power of the first model to become the second one. I quote Derrida, potentially the power to become infinite and disymmetrical, end of the quote. How this is possible? The answer to this question determines the very possibility of a disymmetrical community of spectral friends operating in the praxis of symbols. Well, I almost ran out of time, but I have a third part of my work referring to the gift and the symbol of spectral Übermenschen, in plural, not singular, and Überfrauen, superwomen, we can say. In this third part, I look for the spectral potentiality of the distant one, is the name that Derrida puts in this Übermensch, the distant one, who has a spectral potentiality to overcome the enlightened heritage of the logic of reward that governs our community. So we talk about a domination without limits, a gift without limits, and this is the central part, the essential part of the image or metaphor of Übermensch as a normative, we can say, normative orientation of this community yet to come. Well, that's all. Thank you very much.
Questions? Thank you, Pablo. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I'm a little struck by, and in a positive way, by your reuse of symbols, right? Symbol to a point. I wouldn't say it's a bad word, but it's a word that I've never not been used for a while. Sign, signifier, and so on. So I symbol as more of a I don't know. It's a complex term, but I really like it. And I see some symbols, and what you made me think, because you kept kind of mentioning my question, or the subject of my question, but never went into it until yet, which is when you mentioned the possibility for your next part about the ego of power.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because obviously, like one of the most important texts of the idea of Nietzsche is Spurs, or École.
Yes.
And it begins with the question of woman.
Yes.
Right? And that is like, for me, like probably the biggest question that the idea asks Nietzsche, right? And asks us when we consider Nietzsche's work, right? Which is like, what is the role of sexual difference, right? So I was wondering, because at the end you mentioned it, because I think when we are talking about organization with the critics in École and Nietzsche, suggesting sororization, like what is the position of the sister, right? Even when you said logophonosentrism, like you didn't mention phallogocentrism, right? Like as that kind of issue. So I think, yeah, I just wanted to hear you more about what role in these conceptualizations you're making has the question of sexual difference that for the idea is question in Nietzsche, in my opinion.
Yes, no, it's a very interesting question because it puts the attention in the central problematic point of Derrida's writing. Überfrauen is a word that he doesn't use, not even Derrida. I constructed that, but the central question here is to return to that passage of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, when Nietzsche tells us women are not yet possible friends, are not yet, and Derrida focuses in that yet, because for him, Derrida is criticizing the role of women in decadent culture, in nihilist culture. And beyond accusations of misogynist over Nietzsche, that he is not a misogynist, he is criticizing the role of women in such a culture. So Derrida tells us, what if we overcome that culture and include women in our notion of friendship, but in this way, not in the traditional brotherhood sense, but in this sense. So just in this sense, women are specters also, they are not be able, in Derrida's thinking, they are not be able to be friends in this new sense. Well, that's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. I learned more from these matters. But there was something I didn't quite catch in your, because if I understood you correctly, you said something like that symbols are needed in order to be able to, I don't know if include is the right word, but have some kind of community for those who are not yet here. You also said something like symbols, yeah, the community yet to come.
Yes.
Yeah. And because I would say, I don't know, so why is that? Is it because that no community enclosed itself in a presence here and now and things like that? To me, that would be the same. The reason why there are symbols is that there can never be a pure present simple signification. That's why there is a sort of symbolization of
yes.
any possible signification. But I fail to precisely connect, because couldn't there be symbols? That's a historical fact, I would say. Symbols that are extraordinary,
yes.
used for extraordinary exclusive means.
Yes, yes.
So perhaps you could develop that.
No, you are right. Symbols are being used to exclude and to violate another people. So the symbolic sense that I recover here relates with the proposal by Nietzsche of teleopoietic language. Teleopoietic, it's a strange word that he uses in the politics of friendship. It refers to the creative and inventive possibility of symbols to say new facts, and to refer to the distant one or spectre. But you are right. Institutionalized symbols are used to manipulate, to make violence to another. But I'm focusing on the use of symbols that liberates, that invents. That is the way I used that.
So it's more the use. It might also be specific symbols, but it's the use and certain symbols, not symbolicity. I don't know if you can put it that way.
Yes.
As such, that makes possible an inclusion. Yeah.
Yes, it's the process. It's the making of the symbols, not one symbol.
But not any making of any symbol.
Well, not any making. Yes, you're right. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
No, thank you. Thank you to you. Thank you.